Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'll just refer to what Aisha, encouraging the 16 million unemployed to band together and challenge the existing order. I actually think that they're the most vulnerable section of the society and very susceptible to this vote buying. So we must create a society that has the most people employed. I think that's just the way to go. The more unemployed people in the society, the less the possibility of creating the kind of system we seek, even if we don't deserve it. So on the topic, my topic, which is primary elections, changing the way we choose candidates. You know, I've been involved in the political process for so many years. The process during the SDP, the Babangida era, the Babangida transition, SDP and the NRC, they had, I would consider it a better system, process of selecting candidates than we have today. But then the Electoral Act, you know, makes regulations on how parties conduct their primaries. And then it talks about direct and indirect primaries. But you discover that in the parties, whether you choose direct primaries or indirect primaries, it's simply a corrupt process. And then we can spend the whole day, you know, talking about the corrupt nature of the selection process of political parties. But it's important also for us to look at how to deal with them, with those issues, through legal means. And then in the Second Republic, the MPN, as a political party, had a much more robust primary process. Even the presidential elections between Alhaji Shehu Shagari, who eventually became president, and the late Maitama Sule, the current Senate president's father, and so many other people. There were about 6 or 7 candidates. Malamada Muchiroma, may his soul rest in peace, he just died. They participated in the process, and transparent process. And eventually, Alhaji Shehu Shagari won the election. Nobody went to court. But in the UPN, led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, there was no contest. He was selected as the presidential candidate. Nobody went to court. The MPP had its own challenge because the struggle between the late Waziri Ibrahim and Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, late also, led to a split in the party. Waziri Ibrahim emerging in the GMPP as the presidential candidate and Zik emerging in the MPP. So the struggle for who lead the party in the presidential election led to the party splitting. Now the point I'm driving at is that different parties, you know, should have the right, you know, to select their mode of operation in terms of the primaries. Again, in 1979, all the governorship candidates of the UPN were selected. There was no primaries. In fact, in Oyo State, I recall, the younger elements in the party forced Chief Obafemi Awolowo at that time to allow a primaries between Chief Bola Ige and Reverend Alayande. I hope I'm right now. Because left to, yes, Emmanuel Alayande, left to Chief Awolowo, he would have chosen Alayande, but ultimately, Bola Ige emerged as the candidate. Nobody went to court. So the process in the UPN was different from that of the MPN. But in the MPP, subsequently, sometime in 1982, in a senatorial contest, two candidates, one person won the primaries, a certain Honourable Onoha, and then another candidate appealed the primaries verdict, and then was now ratified by the appeals committee as the candidate of the party. So Onoha went to court. Now this was a very important case, and for so many years formed the basis of every decision on election matters. If there's any lawyer here, you'll be conversant with the case of Onoha versus Okafor. So the Supreme Court was clear in Onoha and Okafor that every political party, in fact, the Supreme Court refused to entertain the suit. It declined jurisdiction on the grounds that it was a political question as to who between two candidates will represent a political party. In fact, the court posed a question: how do we determine in this court who between these two candidates would best represent the interest of the MPP? And so if it is a political question, the courts are bound to decline jurisdiction. That was the law until lately, when perhaps because of the provisions of the 2010 Electoral Act and the Constitution, because that was 1979 Constitution, modeled after the United States Constitution. And the Supreme Court, in taking the position in Onoha and Okafor, relied on a case, a 1962 decision of the United States Supreme Court called Baker versus Carr. So the major reason behind that decision was that the courts could not determine, the appropriateness or the basis for taking a decision for a political party. But the new law, the new Electoral Act, and of course the 1999 Constitution as amended, gave the National Assembly the power to regulate the conduct of political parties. And then Section 87 now goes ahead to draw up the processes that must be followed. So what we now have is that you participate in the primaries in a political party, and Section 87 gives you the right, any candidate, if you are not satisfied with the process of leading to the emergence of the candidates, you can contest that decision in court. So the courts have joined the fray. And in the process, what we have is total confusion, even at the level of the Supreme Court. Because by ignoring the ratio in the Onoha and Okafor case, which is that the Supreme Court felt that there was a lack of satisfactory criteria for a judicial determination of a political question. And so you see the courts now determining it depending on the particular case or exigencies of the moment. Let's take the case, everybody knows that the Rotimi Amechi case in Rivers State, where the Supreme Court held, I hope I'm not being too legalistic here, but I'm trying to show the futility in allowing the courts to get involved in this process. So the Supreme Court held, relying on the provisions of the 1999 Constitution, that it is the political party that canvasses for votes. But then the court also goes ahead to say that Rotimi Amechi was the candidate of that party, and therefore that the votes that the PDP got in the election, which was actually cast for Celestine Omehia, was now transferred to Rotimi Amechi. So in this case, the Supreme Court decided for PDP who between Amechi and Omehia would best represent its interest. In effect, the Supreme Court chose the candidate, which, with all due respect, I do not think they have the right to do. So these are the things we need to look at, so that when some of us who lose out, I've been a victim, and I don't complain because I never went to court, because if you take advantage of the system and emerge a candidate in one transition, and then you lose out in another one, you know, it's really a matter for the political parties to determine, if you really ask me. But you know also that the courts have also taken the view that if the law, your own rules, internal rules of a party, makes prescriptions, these are the ways, these are the processes you must follow to select a candidate, then the courts have gone ahead to say that if you don't follow those rules, then you have run foul of the law. So it's left for you to decide which option you really choose. Thank you very much.